Okay. Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure to be here. We'll be talking about zero downtime database migration to the Oracle Cloud, especially ZDM, which is a new product, which we'll be releasing soon. Some of you were here. I recognize a couple of faces, so please bear with me because the first 15 slides are repeated from yesterday, but the rest is a technical deep dive on how the product actually works. Now, a little about me. 私はリカルドです。コスタリカ人です。でも、アメリカに住んでいます。サンフランシスコで。オラクル、シニアプリンシパルプロダクトマネージャーです。クラウドマイグレーション、プロダクトマネージャー。日本語を少し勉強しました。でも、今日、英語を話します。すみません。はじめまして。どうぞよろしくお願いします。Okay. So as required, I have to show the safe harbor statement, especially because this product is just going to be released soon. So some things may change, but actually I can guarantee you that everything that I'm saying today is exactly how the product is and how the product works. I work at Oracle as in the high availability and scalability product management team. We take care of everything that has to do with maximum availability architecture. And all of the products that you can see here, starting with RAC, of course, it is for highly available databases, and all the way to the bottom. In my case, I take direct responsibility of the cluster file system, about database cloud migration, and our patching and provisioning framework called Fleet Patching and Provisioning, or FPP. Yes. Now, the agenda for today, we're going to see just really briefly the database cloud services in the Oracle Cloud. I won't discuss too much because we saw them yesterday, and this is available information for you publicly. And then I'm going to go out talking about zero downtime migration, an introduction, supported platforms, a workflow of how the product works, and then a deep dive in prerequisites, requirements on the source database, requirements on the target database, requirements on the actual server where you're going to be running the zero downtime migration tool, and then a small demo. And then we're going to drill on the operational phases that take place during the migration process. If you have any questions at the end, please stay, and we can use the translation, which is an amazing team actually here in the back. Because yesterday, not a lot of people asked. You can ask in Japanese. They will translate, and I will reply to you. So let's get started. Yesterday, we covered a bit of the services, but I'm going to recap because I think it's really important. The tool that we're offering allows you to migrate your database or move your database between on-premises and the Oracle Cloud. Now, that means that there are an array of services in the Oracle Cloud that you can leverage. Today, we're going to focus on the first 4 because the tool and the first version allows for migration on the first 4. But I will mention the others one as well because they're really relevant to us. So virtual machines is a service that allows for you to run your database in a virtualized environment if you have a need for a less potent environment, and you just have specific needs that don't require specific dedicated hardware as such. Then we have bare metal, which is really important at Oracle because we are the only cloud provider that has dedicated hardware for running Oracle databases. Other cloud providers offer dedicated hardware for other databases, but not specifically designed for the Oracle database. As you know, Oracle does not only software, but also hardware. And we have our premier database machine, which is the Exadata machine. If you like the full potential and features that Exadata offers, you can actually have the Exadata Cloud Service and enjoy dedicated Exadata environments in the Oracle Cloud. Yeah. However, not everybody is ready yet to go to the cloud and still needs to have their databases and data on premises. So we offer a solution in which we have the Exadata machines configured with all of our cloud tooling, and you can have them in your own data center as the Exadata Cloud at Customer. Now, the autonomous database is divided in two. We have the transaction processing part that is then subdivided into serverless and dedicated deployments depending on your need, and the autonomous data warehousing, which is more for analytical workloads. Now, how do you get to the Oracle Cloud, and how do you move your database to the Oracle Cloud? Yesterday, we covered the different best practices and different solutions and tools to do this. Today, we're going to drill down in the Zero Downtime Migration tool, which covers how to move to the first four cloud services. Right? So, Zero Downtime Migration is a tool that we at the Database Development Organization have been working for the past 2 years. We are based on the Fleet Patching and Provisioning framework. The way we work is, quite interesting and leverages all the orchestration that Fleet Patching and Provisioning has to offer. We worked alongside the maximum availability architecture team, so they were responsible of testing the product, breaking the product, and then we had to fix it again and give it to them. Until today, it's fully MAA approved and compliant with the best practices of MAA. The first version of Zero Downtime Migration uses backup and restore for a database instantiation, and I'll explain the process in the future. And it has zero data loss and full cloud security enablement. So how do we work? We have a tool that we wanted to be as simple as possible. So we have a single button approach. Basically, when you download and configure the tool on a separate server, and we will cover this in the future slides, you will have to prefill a template file. This template file has information on the source database, on the target database, and then credentials and others. Once you're ready with this template file, you just need to issue the migration command. As I mentioned, we are fully MAA compliant. We do background and extensive pre-check and post-checks in the source and target database before and after the migration. You can pause at any given time and then resume. You can also roll back if you don't like what you're seeing, or for any need you have to roll back to your database on premises. We also have a dry run option. The dry run option basically allows us to fake a migration and see what would happen if we do the migration, so that if there's anything that can happen in a negative way, we can foresee this, and then you can work on this and fix it before the actual migration, right? Now, as you can see, we say customizable workflow and job framework. This is because we have 26 steps, which I'll show specifically today. And after step number 6, you can actually insert any given script that you have, and you can say to the tool, between step 6 and 10, and then after step 15, I want these scripts to be run. They can be run at the source database, they can be run at the target database, it all depends on you. Now, we can grow to the size of your fleet, so we can migrate multiple databases, we can do migrations in parallel, we can even schedule operations. And basically, this means that if you want to migrate your database Saturday at 3 in the morning, you can do this and just issue the command Friday at any time, and we will schedule the migration so it happens with no disruption to everybody's service. Now, which sources that we support? 11G databases up to 19C, and then targets the same. We recommend to do migration between same versions, and of course, it's one platform only since we leverage DataGuard. But in version 2, we're going to be using Golden Gate, and it will be multi-platform. As I mentioned, these are the 4 cloud services that we support. Now, we recommend that migration is done in the same version, so 11G to 11G, 12C to 12C, and I'll talk more about patch levels once we get to that section of the presentation. If you are holding your databases on Cloud Infrastructure Classic or Generation 1 Cloud, you can migrate to the new cloud generation 2 or OCI using zero downtime migration. Now, I'm going to go quickly through a step-by-step workflow, which is like 8 slides. If you were here yesterday, you saw this, but then we're going to go into specific on the technical side. First step will be to download and configure ZDM, which has to run on a Linux 7 server. We configure the tool and fill the template file with all the source and target information. We then issue the command to migrate, and ZDM starts under the covers doing the next steps, all automated. So we connect to the source and target using SSH connectivity. We then connect to the source of backup. So in the case of OCI, if you're migrating to bare metal virtual machines or Exadata Cloud Service, is the object store. In the demo that I will be showing shortly, in maybe 10 slides, we migrate to Exadata Cloud at Customer. So there, the backup location can be different. In this case, it could be the recovery appliance, or it could be NFS storage if you deem it to be that way. But for the purpose of these next slides, we're going to use the object store. So ZDM issues a command so that the source connects to the object store via HTTPS, so it's secure. And then we start transferring database files. This means the full backup, incremental archives, and anything necessary for us to instantiate a standby on the cloud target database. Once we have finished transferring the database files, we will instantiate a standby using the files in the object store, in the Oracle Cloud service that you have chosen. Remember that the object store is in your tenancy, because we will never have access to your data. This is all kept under your control, and we only orchestrate and facilitate the process, but your data is always your data. Once we have instantiated the standby, ZDM establishes SQLnet connectivity between the source and the target, and synchronizes the primary and the standby in a data guard fashion. We then perform a switchover and then do a role swap when the source database on-premise becomes the actual standby and the target database on the cloud becomes the primary. Once you're ready, you finalize at will, and you decide when to stop and then clean up afterwards, meaning cleaning SQLnet connectivity, HTTPS connectivity, and all the SSH connectivity, plus different works that we've done on the source and the target, which I'll be mentioning soon when we go to the details. So, as you can see, there's 8 simple steps. You download ZDM and configure it. ZDM connects to the source and target using SSH connectivity. ZDM asks for the source to connect to the object store using HTTPS. Then we start transferring database files to the object store or your backup method. We then instantiate a standby using the data transfer database files. We then synchronize the primary and standby using SQLnet connectivity. We switch over and role swap between primary and standby databases, and then when you're ready, you finalize at will. Now, I'm going to switch to the demo, and the screen is going to be black for a second, so I ask for your apologies. Chotto mate kudasai. So the demo is basically moving a 12.1 container database from on-premises to Exadata Cloud customers, and we use the recovery appliance as a backup medium. I will explain briefly what the different windows are, and then I will just let the demo play. On the top right, you have the on-premise database. On the middle right, you have the Exadata Cloud Customer. And on the bottom right, you have SwingBench. SwingBench is an application developed by one of our product managers that allows to see the application and the workload of the database, so we can see when we're doing the actual migration and the switch over between on-premise and the cloud. On the left, the big console is ZDM. And one important thing here is to mention is that at some point we're going to show how we're configuring the cloud on, with the cloud interface. So we'll be switching in different moments. Now, this here is on the left is the template file that you have to fill up before starting the migration, which will have the source database information and the target database information. Now, this is the ZDM CLI or ZDM command line interface and the migration command. One thing that we can tell the migration is to pause after different phases, and I will talk more about it when we're finalized with the demo. These are the different phases, and we will see them once the demo is completed. So that's basically, took maybe half an hour, 40 minutes, but we compressed it in a 4-minute video for you to see how the migration would work so all of the steps are done actually automatically and automated by us. Only if you ask for certain phases to be paused is when we will pause at any given time that you ask. Otherwise, the whole process runs in an automatic fashion. Now, prerequisites. We need, the ZDM needs to run on a host that has Oracle Linux 7. It can actually also run in a instance on a cloud, but ideally you will have a host by yourself. We require 100 gigabytes of local file system free storage, not because of the installer of the product, but actually because of all the logs we're generating and creating while migrating your database. Now, a small couple of details. You need to create a ZDM group and a ZDM user, and they need to be part of glib cdevil and expect packages that must be installed, right? Now, installation, we follow a lot of the same principles as Oracle as well. So you need Oracle Home, Oracle Base, right? And it's quite straightforward to install. We're actually and as I told you, we leverage the fleet and batching and provisioning framework. So we follow the same logic as grid infrastructure. Now, for connectivity, as I mentioned before, we use SSH keys, right? So you need the service node where ZDM resides needs the SSH keys or root access to both the source and the target. So that's why we recommend that you have the ZDM node on your premises, because you will be having entering information that is yours and yours only and confidential. So we felt that it's important for you to handle this and not to be on Oracle side, but actually completely in your control, right? When you're migrating RAC databases, as long as you have access to one of the nodes, that's fine. You don't need to have access to the whole cluster, right? And then it's important that the host names for both source and target should be resolvable on the ZDM host. So just have proper network configuration and the etc host file properly configured and test that it works. Now, for the source database, it must be running in archive log mode. And really important is as follows. We allow for 11G onward databases to be migrated to the Oracle Cloud. As you know, by default, Oracle databases in the Oracle Cloud are encrypted with TDE, so they're TDE enabled, right? However, most of the databases on premises from our customers are not necessarily TDE enabled by default, right? So we felt it wasn't neither fair nor productive to ask you to encrypt them before migrating, especially because before 12.2, this is an offline operation, and I could never ask you to do bring offline a production database. That wouldn't be, nobody would do this, right? So the product itself, what it does is that we take care of the encryption for you. In unencrypted databases will be taken care of, and once migrated to the cloud, we will take care of the encryption of the database. And we did a lot of testing for this. There's only maybe 1 or 2 cases, and they're really well documented, where you have to do some manual work after the migration process. Now, if your database is before 12.2, there's nothing for you to do. You just migrate it, and we take care of the encryption. If the database is 12.2 or higher, you just have to configure the TDE wallet, which is a simple step for you to make. And we specify on the documentation how to do this, right? Now, the 1521 port has to be open and not open blocked by a firewall. And of course, if you're using RAC, then a snapshot control file should be configured to shared location on all RAC instances. Otherwise, you're going to have an error during the backup process. Now, to finalize before going to the operational phases, for the target database, it's quite simple. You must create a placeholder or temporary database on the Oracle Cloud. We specify how to do this on the OCI console, and this database has to be in open mode. If they are in a different patch level, we recommend them to be at the same. If for some reason you cannot have the database on-premise on the same level, just let it not be higher than the actual database on the cloud. We can have a lower database, at least from patch level perspective, on premises, and then on the cloud it has to be a higher level, and we will apply data patch once migrated, right? And then on the target database, the TD wallet, should be set to open, and the wallet type should be set to auto login. Now, for the operational phases, we have 4 specific categories that are divided in operational phases. So the 4 categories are analysis and preparation, migration, switch, and finalize. You saw mostly how it works first on my 8-step explanation, and then in the demo we saw, or the video we saw. But now I'm going to talk about the 26 stages in each one of step by step. Sorry. Now, really important is to say that these stages are comprehensive, but each migration might be different depending on the backup location and the method or where you're actually migrating. So, starting with analysis and preparation, we have 2 steps. First of all, ZDM has ZDM get source info, which will retrieve information from the source database, and then ZDM get target info, which retrieves information from the target database on the cloud, and the placeholder database that you have created for us to migrate to. Then we have a setup of the source database, and we have helper modules, which are just small agents that will be on the source database, on the target database, for us to communicate and do the work and allow ZDM to properly migrate and move your databases. We do this on the source database, and then we set them up also on the target database on the cloud. Now, we were talking about how customizable ZDM is and how we have a jobs framework. This is because in any stage of the migration, you can actually add user actions or scripts that you have provided, right? So before this step 6, you cannot put any scripts. But after step 6, at any given time, you can say, I want a script to be running on stage 8 or stage 10, and you can say, I want the script to run on the source database side or on the target database side. So step 5 and 6 is for us to register your user actions or scripts at the source database, and also your scripts at the target database, depending on what you want to run. Then what we do is since we use a backup and restore migration module, we have to install the database cloud backup module at the source database, and the same module at the target database. We then move to the migration part. And here we generate a random RMAN password for the backup for the encryption of the backup. Yeah. Then we start performing a full backup of the source database. Right? We create an incremental backup of the source database as well. And then we do a validation of the backups that we have created. We then are ensured the target is ready, and we do a validation in that part as well. Right? And then what we do is, we do a DataGuard discovery at the source database, because we have to set up DataGuard for this process to happen. We then start copying files to the actual object store, and copying Oracle password files and the TD wallet from the source and the target, and moving this to the target key store. We then prepare the target for the DataGuard standby creation, right? And once it's ready, we create the standby on the target. We then finalize the preparation of the target database, the DataGuard standby on the target, and we register the cloud standby with the actual source. And this is done with the SQLnet connectivity as described previously. We then move to the switch phase, and we initiate switchover actions at the source database, and we complete the switchover actions at the target database, right? This includes also the role swap. So now the database on the cloud is a primary, and the database on premises is a standby. Yeah. Now you may want to have any post-user actions, so anything that has to be done after migration and after role swap. So we run them at the source, and we don't run them at the target. This is if you have configured this. If you didn't, then we skip these 2 steps. And finally, we perform a cleanup, meaning all the ZDM helper modules, any connectivity, everything that has to be set up for ZDM to work. We clean up the source, and then we clean up the target. Yeah. As I told you, this is basically the 8 steps, right? So all the 26 operational phases that I mentioned happen actually in a more summarized fashion here. Yeah. Now, in spirit of last week Open World, and when Larry announced the actual free Oracle Autonomous database and a tier specifically for free Oracle Cloud databases, we haven't talked about licensing of ZDM, right? And prices of ZDM. Well, it's really important because we are making this tool completely free for you to use. There is no charge and there is no cost as long as your source database is a licensed database, a licensed Oracle database. Now, we will be releasing in the next couple of weeks. We're actually ready now to release the tool. And one important thing to mention is that we're already working on version 2, which will allow for a migration to the autonomous database, and we will use Golden Gate. So if we have Golden Gate and free, those words don't match. But we've worked with our executive team and gotten an exception. So ZDM plus Golden Gate, so the configuration as a whole, are going to be as well free. We are going to come up with a plan in which you can use it maybe for 3 months or 6 months during the migration process or your different migrations at no cost at all when we have Golden Gate. But first version as well that has data card based will be always at no cost for you to migrate to the Oracle Cloud. Now we have maybe 8 minutes. Here we have some ZDM stickers like this one here. So you can, I'm more than glad for you to have them. But if you have any questions, I'll be really happy for you to, have the questions, and the translators will be helping us out. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much.